Good morning and welcome to our audience and those of you joining us online today. My name is Cassy Christianson and I'm a member of Stanford Hospital's Community Council. I live in Palo Alto here. I'm so glad that you could join us today this morning. We're going to have a discussion of personalized nutrition and more. But before we get started, I wanted to let you know that you can submit questions throughout this entire presentation by using the QR code that's found on your program or online. Now it's my pleasure to introduce nutrition scientist Dr. Christopher Gardner, the Rehnborg Farquhar Professor of Medicine at Stanford and a professor at the Stanford Prevention Research Center. Dr. Gardner's research is focused on what foods to eat and what foods to avoid for optimal health. He's designed and conducted numerous studies on nutrition, and his ongoing trials examine the impact of current dietary trends, the gut microbiome, inflammation, and immune function. Please join me in welcoming him. He served on the board of health organizations, and he's proud to note that he's almost never been seen wearing a tie. And I can see today's no exception, Dr. Gardner.
Thanks, Kathy. Thank you all for coming out. I think this is going to be fun. A huge shout out to Stanford Medicine and the whole Health Matters team, and especially Carla Scheifele for putting this whole thing together. We're really thrilled. I really love to see how often Stanford Medicine and the hospital try to take the opportunity to give back to the community. So it's really fun to see you out here, and thank God we're live after so many remote things for so long. Woo! But I did have to put pants on. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about a couple things, and I've been involved with some groups, so hopefully there's no conflicts of interest perceived. I'm a pretty objective kind of guy. I am excited right now that the NIH is interested in personalized nutrition. They've just funded $170 million in a project that involves 5 centers, and they're going to be collecting data from thousands of people, and there are data centers, and there's blood bank centers, and there's this massive thing going on that you aren't going to know about for 7 years, because it's going to take 5 years to run it all, and then it's take a couple years to analyze it all and hand it back. But there seems to be a lot of interest in this idea of personalized or precision nutrition. So why'd you guys show up today? What do you think I'm going to tell you? Are you, one of the things you might think, is he going to talk about proteins, carbs, or fat? Should I eat low fat or low carb or high protein? That's a common question. Or did you think I was going to talk about the keto diet versus the low-fat vegan diet, which is kind of like Republicans and Democrats. They don't really agree on much, it seems. But I'm going to actually show you where they do agree on some things, just as Democrats and Republicans should do. Were you hoping I was going to talk about food groups? I mean, we already know that there are people with gluten intolerance, so they're avoiding wheat. We know people have lactose intolerance. They're avoiding dairy. That's part of personalized nutrition, recognizing that we all have different needs in one regard or another. I tell you what I am not going to tell you. I wonder if Professor Gardner was going to tell me if I should have raspberries or blueberries, because I've really been debating which one I should buy, or cashews versus walnuts. No one's ever going to get to that level, okay? Go to the farmer's market and get your raspberries and your blueberries and your cashews and your walnuts. Please enjoy all of those. There are a number of companies out there that are promoting their insights into personalized nutrition, and I need you to be a little skeptical. I'm guessing some of you have signed up for some of these, but not those two because they're already gone. So they had great intentions. They spent a lot of money. They're trying to come up with some insights, and it's challenging. Day 2 there has been led by Eran Segal, and I was actually participated in a conference with him just yesterday. He's brilliant. He has a lot of interesting things going on. They're not done yet, but it really is moving forward, as is a group called Zoe. And I am on their scientific advisory board. I don't take any money from them, so I don't feel like I have a conflict of interest there. But I will talk about Zoe just a little bit. Curious to know if anybody's willing to raise their hand that they sent their poop in. Did anybody send their poop in and get it analyzed? And did they tell you anything that changed your life radically? Did they say, you should eat blueberries or raspberries? Or I mean, it is fascinating. I think you're spending $90 or so, and you're sending in poop, which is icky, but I study this all the time now, so it's kind of fun. And really what you're actually paying to help create a database that they will learn a lot from. So I wouldn't be thinking that you're really going to get all the answers from them yet. I think you're going to get some answers, but I think more importantly, you're going to be contributing to the collection of data that will give us insight. So I recommend you do this with a skeptical mind and realizing that you're citizen scientists sort of contributing to the data that we need to come up with the answers. Biome is another one that's out there. Another one is uBiome that's not doing very well because they're being sued for fraud. So you're going to have to be conscious of what's out there and healthfully skeptical. So for Health Matters, be healthfully skeptical of the companies that are out there. So I'm not sure why you showed up today, but I'm going to try to tell you what we have done with a number of colleagues. Oh my God, it is so fantastic to be on this campus. Whatever new question comes up, it's pretty easy for me to look in another department, another division, even another school on campus, and find someone that can bring the expertise that I don't have to my nutrition studies. So I'm going to quickly share a couple of these, and then Cassy and I are going to take a bunch of questions from you. So I'm really only going to have time to give you some snippets. So one of these came from an $8 million, 5-year weight loss study that we did with 600 people. Some of them may be in the audience today. Thank you very much for participating in our research studies. And in this particular trial, we pitted low carb versus low fat. It was a healthy low carb versus a healthy low fat, and I'll get back to that in just a minute. And we weren't really interested in which diet is better. We were actually interested in whether we could predict if one diet was better for someone than another. Did we have the tools to do that? And so I think of that as precision nutrition or personal nutrition. Statistically, we call it effect modification. And so in this study, I'm showing you the results of 5 years of work with 600 people, half assigned to low carb and low fat. And this is the range of weight change they had at the end of 12 months. The average difference was 1 kilo. Doesn't seem to make a difference, does it? I mean, some people were wildly successful, and bless the hearts of the people who gained weight in a weight loss study and came back and shared their data with us, right? To show, I mean, they could have said, oh my God, I'm not going to show up because I gained weight in a weight loss study. But when we set this up, we said, boy, there are a lot of people that are interested in this answer to this question, and you might have been assigned the wrong diet. And so if you were assigned the wrong diet in this personalization thing, it's really important that you show up, and bless their hearts, they did. They showed up. And so we took this, and we actually weren't, again, interested in low carb versus low fat. We expected this huge range of response within each group after getting the same advice. And so one quick conclusion you can come to from this is you can lose weight on either diet, right? But not everybody loses weight on either diet. And can we help? And sadly, after all those years of work, we had 2 ideas. One was a genetic signature, and one was a metabolic signature. Neither of them worked. And so I had to say, oh my God, this is 10 years of my life. All the grants I got rejected, all the time it took to run the paper, run this study, and then get the paper published. And we got a full-page write-up in the New York Times from Anna Had O'Connor. It was an interesting conversation. So he said, so you showed nothing, right? And I said, no, let me tell you about all the strengths and the limitations of the study. And basically, there isn't one diet for everybody, and everybody can lose some weight on different, or somebody can lose some weight on almost every diet out there. But in the course of our conversation, a really interesting thing came up. We tried to make it the healthiest low fat and the healthiest low carb we could, which I'm not sure all my colleagues have done when they've been comparing the two. We wanted to give them both the best chance they could for success. And we also recognize that people hate counting calories and feeling hungry. So part of the study was once you've done this healthy thing, which means as many vegetables as you can on both diets, no added sugar or refined grain on both diets, because we all agree on that for both, the public health professionals. After that, make sure you eat till you're satiated, because if you're craving food and you're hungry, that won't last long term. And collectively, they lost 6,500 pounds. And so Anna Had, who wrote this up, said, you didn't tell them to cut back on calories? I said, no, I don't really think that works. we just focused on avoid foods high in fat or avoid foods high in carb, but eat an overall healthy diet. And he came up with this title for his article. This is not what we studied. That was not the hypothesis. And I looked at it the next day and I thought, oh, should I be angry? Like, we had this really long conversation, but that is a side finding that we got. Everybody focused on quality and they weren't counting calories, and overall, they were successful. So I want that to be an underlying message today. As much as there are some things we might cherry pick around the corners and the edges about personalizing your diet, there's some stuff that everybody could get right and do well with. So I don't want to get too carried away with personalization. I'll show you a couple other studies real quickly before we take questions. And one of them had to do with alternative meat. We're in Silicon Valley where, lots of people are creating cool new things. We've got Impossible here. Beyond is from down in the LA area. We've got all these fake meat products. And I saw a full-page New York Times article slamming them. It was from the Consumer Freedom Choice, which is really the Beef Council with another name. And it said, here's the ingredients in these different meats, and here's the ingredients in dog food. See if you can tell the difference. That stuff is dog food. And they said it's high in saturated fat. It'll raise your cholesterol. It's high in sodium. It'll raise your blood pressure. There's a study out there that says highly processed food leads to weight change. Don't do it. And I said, wait, I do that. I study weight and cholesterol and blood pressure. And so we got some funding. Full disclosure, it came from Beyond Meat, so I'm an industry shill. Keep that in mind as you see the next result. But we ran a study called Swap Meat. I hope you will appreciate the acronym of the study with appetizing plant food, a meat eating alternative trial. Swap Meat, like that, okay? And in this trial, 3 things changed significantly as 36 people did both diets for 8 weeks each. And trimethylamine oxide went down in the plant food arm, and that's a good thing for that to go down. Weight went down, not up. LDL cholesterol went down, not up. Blood pressure at the very bottom didn't change. So really what we saw in this head-to-head comparison was the plant-based alternative meat had 3 benefits, and the red meat had none. And for red meat, we went to San Francisco, and we got a group that served regenerative farming, pasture-raised, organic, quality. We didn't do Beyond Meat versus lousy meat. So we gave it its best shot. This is what we got. You can ask me more details later, but I'll tell you what I want to get into is this emerging risk factor called trimethylamine oxide. It's not a standard thing the doc will give you now. If Stan Hazen at the Cleveland Clinic has his way, it will be someday. He thinks this is a really hot topic, this trimethylamine oxide. But here are the results from the folks who did it in 2 different directions. On the left, we have plant first and then animal second. And on the right, we have animal first and plant second. And let's start on the right. So when we were giving them their 2 servings of meat a day, trimethylamine oxide went up. Not in all of them. So here's a personalized thing. It only went up in some of them, but not the other group. And then when they switched to the plant food meat, it went down right away and stayed down. Pretty clear, right? Okay. Now, one of the things in my line of work that you can do is you can just assign people to A or B, or you can do A and B and then have them do the opposite one. Then everybody's their own control. Scientifically, it's kind of cooler if you're your own control, but there's a downside. If order matters, you have to be all tongue-tied when you present the results. And in this case, order mattered. And so when we go to the left side now, when we gave the plant food first, which basically made them vegans, and then we gave them red meat, what happened? It didn't go up in anyone. It's kind of cool, but it's also kind of frustrating because now I got to explain that order mattered. And we looked into this, and there's a little bit of literature that said vegans don't make TMAO because this is a microbiome thing. There are things in red meat, carnitine and choline, that travel to your gut where different bacteria metabolize that and create the trimethylamine, which then goes to your liver to get oxidized and make trimethylamine oxide. And so maybe what we did is in making them vegan for 8 weeks, we changed the milieu, the environment of their gut, And that gave them a different response to the same red meat. So fortunately, we have these incredible microbiologists at Stanford, Justin and Erica Sonnenberg, and they have a whole freezer full of crap right now from our participants. And they are looking at it to see if we can explain why this was different based on order. But again, this is to me another hint of this personalized nutrition. You all have a different microbiome. Maybe some of the different aspects of your microbiome are leading to a different response to the same foods that you and your next door neighbor or your family member eat. Okay, here's one more that we did with the Sonnenbergs. This was a lot of fun. We got 18 people to eat as many servings of fermented foods as possible and 18 people to double their fiber. Okay, and we had a fantastic Hannah Wastick was this great PhD student that worked on it, and Gabby Fragidakis was a great postdoc who worked on this. And we called this one Fee-Fi-Fo. Fee for fermented, Fi for fiber, Fo for food, okay? And what this basically was is a comparison head-to-head of prebiotics and probiotics. So prebiotics is basically anything with fiber that as humans we don't digest and we don't absorb, so it all goes to the colon, and the bugs in the colon, the microbiome, use it as fuel. Okay, so that's prebiotics, and then probiotics is actually eating live bacteria. And so we got people to eat, on average, 5 to 6 servings a day for this study. Does that sound like a lot? Okay, but keep in mind, a cup of sauerkraut is 2 servings. A cup of kimchi is 2 servings. If you bought a bottle of kombucha at the store, the whole bottle is 2 servings. Yogurt, a half cup or a cup is a serving. So let's say you had a little bit of yogurt for breakfast, a little bit of sauerkraut for lunch, a little bit of kimchi for dinner, and you were having some kombucha during the day. Turned out that was only about 300 calories on average, depending on what combo you had. So 6 servings a day might sound high, but it wasn't really that high. So that was our probiotic arm, because it's containing those. And what we found in the study was, the result was the fiber group didn't get an overall change in increasing their microbial diversity, and they didn't lower their inflammatory markers. And that's what we were hypothesizing, that by changing the diet, we would change the microbiome and lower inflammation and improve immune function. Across the board for the fermented food, they all did well. We increased their microbial diversity, not just with the bugs they were getting from the foods they were eating. A whole bunch of new bugs showed up along the way. Different bacterial strains appeared. We're still looking into why that happened. Probably if you change the gut environment, you open up an opportunity for something that was there at a subdetectable level to all of a sudden bloom. So this is a cool new field of the microbiome that I'm in. And we had 20 different inflammatory markers go down. We did look at 90, but 20 of them went down and none went up. And as we looked a little more deeply at the results, and the Sonnenbergs are fantastic at this, there probably was an impact in fiber. And what it was is that people with the lowest microbial diversity, the worst microbial diversity to begin with, actually had a bit of an adverse reaction to the high fiber. It was like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this much fiber. Not now, not today, and I'm having trouble handling it. Whereas that people with the most microbial diversity did handle the extra fiber well, and they benefited, and it canceled out. And so the way we interpreted this in the paper was the fiber was more of a personalized response, whereas the fermented food was pretty much good across the board for people who had more. So again, this is another hint of personalization. Okay, so the last one that we're working on, and you can't tell anybody because this is just about to be accepted for publication. It's not out yet. We tried to compare the ketogenic diet to the Mediterranean diet in a very particular way. And what we did is we tried to have 3 things in common between both diets: lots of vegetables, no added sugar, and no refined grain. So those are the 3 things that were in common, and I can get almost every health professional I know to agree on those 3 things. But the ketogenic diet is intended to be very, very low carbohydrate, and to get that low, you can't have any grains, any fruits, or any legumes or beans, which is a little crazy to me because all the health professionals I know pushing the Mediterranean diet or dietary guidelines for Americans are all very pro fruits and whole intact grains and legumes and beans. So that was the design of the study. And I want to refer you quickly to some interesting US data across 20 years from about 1999 to 2016. That's the most recent data they had from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. So those are total calories. We get the most carbs, then fat, then protein. But then they looked at subtypes of carbs, subtypes of protein and fat. Now look along the bottom for the moment and start with carbs. So we get maybe 10% of our calories from good quality carbs, maybe 10 or 5 from animal protein and plant protein. If you split the fats into mono, poly, and saturated fats, about 10 from each. The elephant in the room is this. And because of this, I'm a huge fan of low carbohydrate diets that get rid of those, the crappy carbs. But if you did, you have to replace them with something. You could replace them with better quality carbs, or you could replace them with good quality fats. It's actually, people don't change their protein much. We could get into that later if you want. Or a combination of carbs and fats. And I think this is a level of personalization we could get to. I think some people actually do better with a low-fat, high-carb diet if the carbs are the healthy carbs. And I think there are people out there that do better with a lower-carb, higher-fat diet if the fats are the nuts and seeds and the avocados and the fatty fish. Okay, so anyway, we're trying to focus on what everybody agrees on and then look to see if there's any additional benefit to eliminating beans, fruits, and whole grains. And here's the study design. This is another crossover. So there's not much of an order effect this time, thank God. And the way we did it is we had a delivery service provide food for the 4 weeks, so they'd be instantly adherent. And then for 8 weeks, they had to provide all the food on their own. And then they'd cross over into the other diet. Same thing, 4 weeks of provided food, 8 weeks on their own. And then we actually followed them 12 weeks later, knowing that they had been on both diets. So what's it like after you've been on both? Which one do you want? So I had an incredible grad student, Matt Landry, create this graphic. I don't want to get into too much detail and take up too much time, but each line is one of the 40 people in the study. And so at baseline, we came up with a keto score and a med score. And 10 is perfect and 0 is lousy. And so you can see from baseline at the far left to food delivery, they did much better. Actually, shouldn't they all have been 10 when we were delivering food? They didn't eat all the food we gave them. And again, sort of bless their hearts for being honest. But what the F? We delivered food. Come on. At which point, Justin looks at me and says, my mice always ate all the food that I gave them in the lab. I said, I know, that's humans. Okay, but a cool internal validity thing is, according to our scores, they ate equally high on average on both diets when we were delivering food and equally high when they were making the food on their own. So actually, that's internal validity for my study. And humans are humans, so they're not perfect. But what really cracks me up is this personalization. Look at the people cooking the keto diet on their own. Some were 10s, and someone was 0. Like, I cannot do this, or I can do it perfectly. I can't explain that. Humans are different. So I think there's some personalization there. If you look out to the follow-up, you can see that they were more Mediterranean than keto at the end, but I don't really have time to go into that. I want to show you that they both lost a bunch of weight on the first phase, and then they flipped over, and by the end of the second phase, regardless of which order they were in, they ended up about the same average weight. So that's kind of fascinating. Okay, and then I don't have time to show you all the different results, but basically there was a modest benefit for the keto diet for carbs, which makes a lot of sense because they weren't eating any carbs, so not much shows up in your blood. And the keto diet actually did a little better at lowering triglycerides, which is quite common. The Mediterranean diet lowered triglycerides, but keto more. But then the other things that were going on is the keto diet raised LDL cholesterol. There was a nutrient problem, so they're eating fewer nutrients because it's such a restrictive diet. They were really not getting much fiber. And again, we're looking at the microbiome from this study right now, and people couldn't follow it. If you look out to the end, very few people were following it 12 weeks after. So again, I'm not telling you the whole study result here. I don't have all the time, but I do think there's some hints of personalization in here that I'm trying to track down with my colleagues. And one of the ways people are doing this now is with continuous glucose monitors. I'd be happy to take a question later on these. These are the shiny new toy out there right now. And this group that I work with, Zoe, they do this all the time in their studies. They actually have a set of 1,000 twins they've been working with in the UK, and a lot of their database comes from continuous glucose monitors. I worked with them on Predict 2, which is a new study of 1,000 people, all done remotely, which has led to Predict 3, which is a study where they're trying to get 10,000 people remotely, which is almost the scale of the NIH's $170 million project. So they published 2 incredible papers, as far as I'm concerned, in Nature Medicine about this idea of personalized nutrition. They're on the cusp of finding things out. They're not quite there yet. There's a lot we need to know, but this is the direction that we're heading. I want to end the talk after all this personalization with my personal thoughts about where you should focus more of your attention, and that's on a foundational diet. So I'm pretty convinced all my health professional friends will agree on what I said before. Eat a lot of vegetables. Don't eat added sugars and refined grains, or limit them as much as you can. Eat whole foods and not processed foods. I can't find anybody, whether they're keto or low-fat vegan, who wouldn't say that. Honestly, they're all on board, even the keto and low-fat vegan. That next level, I'm going to have to leave the keto folks out and the low-fat vegan folks out, because they're the fringe. I can get almost everybody to agree on beans, fruits, nuts, eggs, and fish. Okay, the beans have lectins. There's some small issues with lectins, but there's a lot of great things in beans. Please eat more beans. And the fruits have sugar, but it's tied up in a food matrix of fiber, and the sugars aren't absorbed as quickly as with added sugars and refined grains. Please eat fruits, seasonal fruits. Go out to your farmer's market. It's actually, markets lately have been looking really good. Fats, whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to go that far. Yes, the nuts have fats, but they're unsaturated, so those are pretty healthy for you. Yes, eggs have cholesterol, but not much saturated fat. It's actually the saturated fat in your diet more than the cholesterol in your diet that affects your blood cholesterol. Yeah, we don't have time for that one now. And yes, vegetarians, fish have a face, okay? But, overall, I can get almost everybody to agree on those. And then if we go out a little further and we talk about grains or poultry, are we talking steel-cut oats, or are we talking about donuts? Those are really very different grains, right? Are we talking Kentucky Fried Chicken, or are we talking pasture-raised chicken that you found and you did all the right things? So could we be more specific about the context of the grains and the poultry? I think we'd get a fair amount of agreement there. And the most controversial ones for me are dairy and meat. But again, context matters. Yogurt and go-gurt are really not the same. They are 2 completely different entities. And again, if you've got some pasture-raised, grass-fed beef, that's very different than processed hot dogs. So there's really quite a bit of agreement here on a foundational diet. And even beyond the foundational diet, there's considerable agreement. So I know the headlines make it seem like we're whiplash. We changed everything from yesterday because of this study we found today. Not true. If you look more closely, we only move incrementally forward, and we agree on almost everything. So let me leave you with some food pictures. I've been pushing people for a more whole food, plant-based diet, even vegan or vegetarian if you do it the right way. And I get this response, yeah, but I really like my steak, and maybe I'm willing to have Mediterranean diet with chicken. But God, you want me to eat rice and beans? Oh, that just sounds so boring. I'm not. I work with the Culinary Institute of America these days, and there's 3 kinds of Mediterranean salads. You could have it with chicken, you could have it with feta and be vegetarian, or you could have a vegan Mediterranean salad. Any of these are fine and much better than most people eat. Shakshuka, oh, this is a really simple dish to eat. Middle Eastern, traditionally it's got beef and eggs. The one in the middle, we left out the beef. The one on the right, we left out the eggs by taking some sliced squash and made them kind of look like eggs. I know, it's kind of hokey. All right, it's a little goofy. Tacos. Ah, what a great evening meal. You can personalize your own meal around the family table. You can have the fish tacos or the cheese tacos or the vegan tacos. They're all pretty delicious. A world bowl. Here's a Korean fried chicken. There's a lot of vegetables in that bowl. Or another bowl with just an egg that's vegetarian, or a Buddha bowl. Oh, I've had some awesome Buddha bowls lately. Okay, I want to give a little plug for a study that we're doing. Actually, wait, let me go back to this one for one more minute. So the foundational diet to me means all of these are options for you. Eat a good diet, focus on some of the main things we all agree on, and then personalize it. And if you personalize it in some of the ways I just showed in those dishes, they're probably all okay for you. It needs to be culturally appropriate and financially appropriate. There's a lot of ways to modify those. So I hope you'll do that, and I hope you'll support our further studies. The most recent one is moms. Does anybody know someone who's pregnant? Okay, we are trying to get 130 women who are pregnant to eat more fiber or fermented food or both or neither. And then we're going to check out their microbiome, and then we're going to track their infants for 12 to 18 months and check out the transmission of the microbiome to the kid. So that's my shameless self-promotion. You can either do the QR code or just tell the friend of yours that's pregnant that we need more participants. They could actually be anywhere in California. It's mostly here, but we're expanding to be more remote. And just have them write nutrition at stanford.edu. That's pretty straightforward, right? OK. Anyway, I'm super happy that I got to do this. I want to give a thanks to, I don't have an acknowledgement slide because it's too hard. Postdocs, PhD students, master's students, undergrads, different schools on campus, different divisions on campus. This is such an incredibly supportive place to work. Stanford Medicine offers me a lot, and I hope we're giving back to you with these kinds of results to help answer the questions that you have. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gardner, for sharing those insights with us. I'm really particularly interested hearing about the probiotics and prebiotics. I didn't understand the difference before. I want to remind the audience that you can submit questions at any time using your QR code. And I see we already have a few questions lined up. So, with all these trends out there, can you help us decipher a few of the things we might see in media? You mentioned the continuous glucose monitors. Maybe we'll start there. This seems to be the next big thing. Can you tell us how that compares to standard clinical measures you might get from your doctor?
Right. And so this isn't a standard clinical measure yet. It is the shiny new toy that's out there. Just, can I see a show of hands? Has everybody used a continuous glucose monitor? I'm going to guess that we have people. Ooh, not nearly as many as I would have thought. OK. So maybe it's because I'm in research, because we've been handing them out left and right in research as a shiny new toy. You can put a patch on your shoulder or your abdomen. It's got a little pricky needle that really you barely feel. It's not the same as a finger prick. You wear it for 10 to 14 days. You hook it to your phone. It'll tell you your glucose every 5 minutes. And if you want to have fun, you eat something and just watch your phone. And from a research perspective, what we get it for people with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, our goal is to have you in range and not be too high or too low, not hyperglycemic and not hypoglycemic. And so we get a readout over 10 to 14 days of what proportion of your time you were in range. And then we can also get an average for the whole 14 days. Now, we actually have a great clinical tool for that called glycosylated hemoglobin. This is better than a fasting glucose measure, because if you're going to see your doc and you weren't really doing so well, you can just plan one day to have a really great day and see your doc and have a blood draw that day and have a good fasting blood glucose. But glycosylated hemoglobin actually is how much glucose gets hooked to your red blood cells. It's almost a 1 month to 3 month measure of how well you've been doing. That is still the standard. There's a parallel that you can get from the continuous glucose monitor. We've tried to match them up in our research, and they don't align perfectly. And I actually got questioned on this just the other day, and they said, oh, in our study we showed they didn't align. They said, so you're going to dismiss the continuous glucose monitor? And I said, actually, I don't know if the continuous glucose monitor isn't better than the glycosylated hemoglobin. It's a shiny new toy. Maybe the reason they don't agree is that glycosylated hemoglobin isn't perfect, and this continuous glucose monitor is better. So I can't answer that. It is a shiny new toy. Clearly, it's more researchers than the general public. It is covered by insurance for some people, but keep your eye on it. It could be a really interesting new clinical tool that we can use for people who are having challenges managing their glucose.
And just incidentally, I know someone who has one, and if he eats certain foods, he sees right away that it's terrible for him. He's pre-diabetic or diabetic now, and it's motivated him not to eat.
Okay,
not to eat that food.
Let me add one thing that this group, Zoe, that I've been working on, has been looking at. Take something that you eat that does horrible things to your blood glucose and eat things with it. And so actually, the amount of sleep you've had the night before, your activity patterns, all kinds of things can affect the glucose response to the same food, including what you eat with it. So some of the strategies are to mix it with something that's higher in fat or higher in fiber that would delay the appearance in your blood. So more to come.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, while we're on the subject about different devices and things, can you tell us your thoughts regarding supplements? That seems to be all over the media. And I'm wondering if you take any supplements or if you suggest any, or do you think we should be really looking for all of our nutrients within food?
So I'll start and I'll just cite some standard American Dietetics Association papers that say you can and should get all your nutrients from food. That's just the bottom line. But how many people don't have regular access to adequate nutrition? And that's a large number. And certainly there's a lot of folks that are challenged in food swamps or food deserts, as we call them. Certainly we have picky kids out there that aren't eating, so maybe a multivitamin for a kid, multivitamin, multimineral. I would recommend some to the med students here who are working these long shifts, one after the other, and they're going to see what's available, and all that's available is the vending machine sometimes. We're working on things like that. So I do think there's a role for supplements, mostly multivitamin, multimineral, things that aren't 1,000 times the RDA. So the recommended daily allowance is there for a reason. It actually has a buffer to cover people. So just try to get 100% of the RDA is fine in these supplements. So, and there may be people with certain conditions where a doc would recommend, oh, because of this, you need more B vitamin or you need more vitamin A. There's kids all over the world that suffer from vitamin A deficiency that benefit from some of the supplements they give of vitamin A. Vitamin D is a little sketchy. I don't know if we want to get into vitamin D now. So there is a place, but you could and should get it all from food. But there are times when they're appropriate.
Okay. All right, well, we just had an interesting question come in from the audience. My teenage son and his friends consume a lot of protein powder. Having teenage sons myself, I can say that I know about this trend. The audience says, I encourage him to use plant-based ones, but I still worry that consuming too much protein can have adverse effects. What do you think?
This is the wrong question to ask me because I have a 1-hour protein rant, but you can. I have a lot of videos on my 1-hour protein rant. I actually have a YouTube channel, so feel free to look it up there. Stop obsessing about protein. Oh my God. So it's not even the plant versus the animal. Your kids don't need more protein. They don't need protein supplements. If they do, the plant ones are fine. There's sort of this myth that plants are missing amino acids. There's a little bit to that, but it's not much if you listen to my rant. As long as Americans eat like 100 grams of protein a day and they only need 50. So the small difference in quality kind of gets washed out in eating too much. But I will give you a personal story, which is I've ranted to I have 4 sons, and the one who's 27 right now had a huge cylinder of protein powder at home. And I gave him my protein rant, and he didn't listen to me. And he came back a year later and said, Dad, I've been looking on the web. Dude, you are right. I saw all these people bust the myth of the protein. I said, thanks, son. Great. I'm your dad. I'm a nutrition scientist at Stanford, and you listen to the web, not me.
Well, this parent's going to say the same thing now. She's going to,
okay.
He or she's going to say.
Don't need any extra protein, and if you're going to do it, plant protein is fine, but you don't need protein powder. Just eat food.
Okay, and teenager, if you're not listening to your parent about this, please see him on YouTube.
Jackson will tell you. Also, call Jackson. He totally believes me now.
Okay, our next question is from someone in the audience over 50. Are there significant dietary changes recommended for people over 50?
So the dietary guidelines do actually have separate age categories of recommendations. Almost all of them are the same. One of the nutrients that can be a little harder to get as you're older for digestive reasons is vitamin B12. Although you only need 3 micrograms of vitamin B12 a day, that's the RDA. There's nothing that you need less of than vitamin B12. But that's for digestive reasons and absorption reasons as your gastrointestinal tract changes. Sarcopenia is an issue for some older adults as they're losing muscle mass. And a lot of people say, we have to raise the recommended daily allowance for protein. I'm fine with that, raising it a little. But a lot of the other things that happen in older populations is gum problems, teeth problems, appetite problems. I'm not really talking 50. I'm talking probably a little older than this. Loneliness, living in a facility where they don't have a lot of friends. So there's hormonal issues to sarcopenia. There's a lot more than just getting enough protein. But sure, have a little more protein. In general, the nutrient recommendations are largely the same as long as you're getting access to adequate variety of food.
Great. All right, well, can you comment a little bit on the association or potential association of the Western diet and disease? How much of the disease we see now is linked to our diet?
Okay, good time to ask because I actually just saw a TED Talk by Dr. Dariush Mozaffarian. He is the Dean of the School of Public Health at Tufts University. And his whole rant was that 80% of the disease we have could be addressed with diet. He said this is the single biggest factor out there. It's insane that we don't teach this in medical school because we don't, not to shame our medical school. Every single medical school in the country, and I've actually been lecturing for some in Europe and other places, it's the same. They're spending so much time learning these other disciplines that they're leaving the nutrition to the dietitians and some of the support team that are there for them. But it's huge. It's absolutely insane that we're not paying more attention to this. This is a huge economic issue with the burden of healthcare just crippling our economy. This is a huge national security problem. I mean, we actually had this 50 years ago when the armed services folks weren't getting enough calories and they were undernourished. Now we're turning away a ridiculous number who don't qualify for the armed services because they're overweight and obese. So we're getting too many calories now. So Dariush went on and on and on about how we really need to refocus, get the National Institutes of Health refocused. I mean, diabetes alone would be a massive opportunity to address very diet-related issues that we're not tackling with the food industry and with safety net programs that we have. I do want to give a shout out to many of the safety net programs in the Bay Area. One in particular, Second Harvest Food Bank. Any of those of you who are aware of this, they've actually changed their guidelines for what you can donate. So some of the things that you can donate that are simplest and shelf-stable have added sugar and refined grain. And they've actually declined that. Second Harvest Food Bank now distributes 50% produce, which is pretty unheard of for a charitable food organization. But other charitable food organizations are stepping up and saying, yes, less shelf-stable, added sugar, refined grain, more produce, more beans. How about dried beans, dried grains, lots of things like that. So there are a number of ways we could address the food issues in the US. And I really think Stanford and my colleagues are turning to that now, and other groups as well. So yes, a lot of the Western disease burden is food related. And I do want to keep working with the Culinary Institute of America because people like the good tasting food. So I'm working on this, everybody. Not cardboard. I know cardboard has a lot of fiber, but great tasting, affordable, accessible food. We're on this. We could really make a huge impact on health and the economy and national security. Just that.
Well, that's great to know. Well, we've come to our last question, and I know we're next going to explore the world of immunotherapy with Dr. Ronald Levy. So before we go to that, I'm really curious about what you think, Dr. Gardner. Where do whole foods fit in with the treatment and specifically the prevention of cancer? And maybe you could talk a little bit about how that's linked to inflammation.
Right. So this is an area of tremendous excitement and frustration for me. I work at the Stanford Prevention Research Center. We have a lot of affiliations with the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Association and with the National Institute of Diabetes, Digestive Kidney Disease, and I get a lot of funding from them. I have never been funded by the Cancer Institute to date. I should. The food issues are likely the same. All the same things I'm promoting for preventing and treating heart disease and diabetes are likely the same for cancer. So this may sound odd to you, but I'll bring this to you from a scientific perspective. And this is totally selfish, but I really wanted to stay at Stanford and get promoted. And to get promoted, you have to publish papers. And if you're going to study heart disease or diabetes, I can design a study that looks at blood glucose, which I can measure every day, blood cholesterol every day, insulin, different things like this. Inflammation is another hot topic. And all of these blood markers, in my world, are established as being related to heart disease and diabetes. I don't have many of those markers for cancer. Did anybody go from their clinician and get their cancer risk assessed? I'm guessing they didn't. And one of the areas that might work along these lines is inflammation. I'm sure everybody's heard of inflammation. I told you that in our Keto Med study, or our Fee-Fi-Fo study, the fermented food folks lowered 20 of their 90 inflammatory markers. I don't know if that's impressive or not, but I really only wanted one. I don't want 90. I don't want 20. So inflammation is a very complex physiological system. And I work with a group, I work with a Center for Immune, oh my God, why am I blocking on this? There's Mark Davis and Holden Maker run this incredible immune center where I can look at inflammatory markers and immune function. And I used to look at 3 or 4 inflammatory markers, and then I got 25 for a certain amount of money, and then I got 50 for a certain amount of money, and then I got 90, and I got an email from these guys the other day that said, for just a few dollars more, I can give you 1,500 inflammatory markers. I said, I don't want 1,500. I want them to have a number. I want them to go to the clinic and leave and say, your cholesterol was this, it was high or low. Your inflammation was this, it was high or low. And we're not there. This field of inflammation is exploding with exciting things, but maybe you heard of CRP, C-reactive protein. Some people are measuring that. IL-6, interleukin-6, some people are measuring that. But I could go on and on and on with a list, and I don't have a number. And I really think inflammation is related to cancer. So I'm really interested to hear Ron's talk, because I want to learn ways that I can connect all the nutrition studies I'm doing right now to inflammation and immune function in a way that would help treat or prevent cancer. And if anybody can do it, Stanford can do it. So again, really excited. I don't have a good answer for it. So far to date, I've been getting grant funding and publishing studies that are heart disease and diabetes related for sheer practical reasons. I need to get promoted and publish papers. But I think cancer is an exciting field, and I'm going to need some help, and thank God I got colleagues here that'll help me.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to hear what he says. But it sounds like in the meantime, the foundational diet that you're recommending is going to have an impact on our health and hopefully on prevention of some of these things that we still have more to learn about.
Yeah, take home here is try to focus on that foundational diet. Don't get confused when the newspapers say everything you knew yesterday has changed today. It's not. It moves painfully, incrementally, slowly forward. Do all the right things, and then maybe biohack and play around at the fringes. Maybe try some of these personalized companies that are out there trying to help you. Give them some of your data so they can come up with the numbers to help you even more. But yeah, foundational diet first, and then and enjoy your food. Nutrition scientist here, giving you permission for joy and pleasure. I'd like to end the talk on that note. Deliciousness, unapologetic deliciousness is what I'm after in the long run, and health and environmental sustainability, just that.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Gardner.